Have you ever judged someone just by looking at them, only to discover you were completely wrong? If you're enjoying this story, please like, share, and subscribe to Heartbound Stories. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Alexander Sterling sat in his favorite corner of the Diamond Palace restaurant, the most expensive place to eat in all of New York City. His suit cost $30,000. His watch cost more than most people's houses. He was scrolling through his phone, his fingers moving fast across the screen, barely aware that real people existed around him. Alexander was not just rich. He was extremely rich. He had $4 billion. That's more money than you could count in your whole lifetime. With that much money, he could buy 1,000 cars, 100 houses, and still have enough left over to buy an island. But having all that money had done something bad to Alexander. It made him think he was better than everyone else. It made him think he was smarter than everyone else. It made him forget that other people had feelings and dreams and brains just as good as his. The waitress came to his table carrying a beautiful crystal pitcher filled with ice water. Her name tag said Elena Washington. She was 29 years old, and she had been working at this restaurant for 6 months. Every single day, she served rich people who treated her like she was invisible. They snapped their fingers at her like she was a dog. They never said please or thank you. They left tiny tips even though their meals cost more than her rent. Alexander looked up from his phone just long enough to see Elena standing there. A mean smile appeared on his face. He thought he was about to make a very funny joke. "Hey," he said with a laugh, "how about you give me some investment advice along with that water?" He thought this was hilarious. A waitress giving money advice to a billionaire? That was like a mouse giving hunting advice to a lion. His business partner, Christopher Park, who sat across from him, chuckled too. They both thought this was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. But something happened that Alexander never expected. Elena stood very still. She looked at him with calm, steady eyes. Her face didn't show anger. It didn't show fear. It showed something else. Something that looked almost like confidence. Then she spoke in a clear, strong voice that seemed to fill the whole room. "Actually, sir, I would invest 40% in emerging market funds that focus on clean energy companies in Asia and South America. I'd put 25% in medical technology stocks that are currently undervalued, especially companies working on artificial intelligence for disease detection. I'd allocate 20% to real estate investment trusts in growing mid-sized cities like Austin and Raleigh. 10% should go into agricultural commodities to protect against inflation. And I'd keep 5% liquid in money market accounts for immediate opportunities when the market dips." The entire restaurant went silent. It was like someone had pressed a giant pause button on the whole world. The other waiters stopped walking. The rich people eating their expensive steaks stopped chewing. The soft piano music playing in the background seemed to get quieter. Even the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling seemed to stop sparkling. Alexander's head snapped up from his phone so fast he almost hurt his neck. His mouth fell open. His eyes got very wide. His face turned a strange color, somewhere between white and pink. This wasn't just a random answer. This wasn't someone making up words to sound smart. This was real financial advice. This was the kind of strategy that top Wall Street experts gave to millionaires. This was the kind of information that people paid thousands and thousands of dollars to learn. "Wait, what did you just say?" Alexander whispered. He stared at Elena like he was seeing her for the very first time. Elena poured his water smoothly and perfectly. Her hand didn't shake. Not a single drop spilled on the white tablecloth. She looked completely calm, as if she hadn't just done something impossible. "You asked for investment advice, sir," she said simply. "I gave you an answer." Christopher started coughing and choking on his wine. He grabbed his napkin and covered his mouth. In the 10 years he'd known Alexander, he'd never seen anyone talk to him like this. Nobody challenged Alexander Sterling. He was too rich, too powerful, too important. Where did you learn about emerging markets?" Alexander asked. His voice sounded completely different now. The joking tone was gone. Now he sounded confused and curious and maybe even a little bit scared. Elena smiled, But it wasn't a normal smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they know a big secret. A smile that said, "I know something you don't know." "You'd be surprised what people can learn," she said quietly, "when you don't assume they're stupid just because they serve you food." Then she turned and walked away. Her shoes made soft clicking sounds on the marble floor. She walked to another table where a family was sitting, and she greeted them with a warm, friendly smile. Alexander sat frozen in his chair like a statue. He couldn't move. He couldn't think straight. His brain felt like it was spinning around and around like a merry-go-round that wouldn't stop. Everyone in the restaurant was whispering now. Rich people in expensive clothes leaned toward each other, talking behind their hands. The restaurant manager stood near the entrance, looking nervous and confused. In all his years working here, he'd never seen anything like this. Nobody had ever embarrassed Alexander Sterling before. Nobody had ever made him look so shocked and confused. Alexander watched Elena move through the restaurant like a graceful dancer. She stopped at a table where 4 businessmen from Japan were sitting. She spoke to them in perfect Japanese, making them smile and laugh. She visited an elderly couple and recommended the perfect wine for their dinner. She moved with confidence and grace, like someone who knew exactly who they were and what they were worth. "Christopher," Alexander whispered to his partner. His voice was shaky. "Find out everything about this woman. Her full name. Where she went to school. Where she worked before. I want to know what she eats for breakfast. I want to know everything." Christopher nodded quickly. He'd known Alexander for a long time. When Alexander became obsessed with something, he never let it go until he got answers. "Do you think she's a spy?" Christopher whispered back. "Maybe someone trying to steal our business secrets?" Alexander shook his head slowly, still watching Elena. "No. It's something else. Something stranger." The truth was, Alexander couldn't accept what had just happened. His entire fortune, all $4 billion, was built on one special skill. He was good at finding talented people before anyone else did. He was supposed to be the smartest person in any room. He was supposed to see things that other people missed. But he had completely missed Elena Washington. He had looked right at her and seen nothing but a waitress. Nothing but a servant. Nothing but someone unimportant and invisible. What else had he missed? What other brilliant people had he walked past without seeing? The thought made him feel sick to his stomach. The next morning, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about Elena Washington. He'd barely slept at all. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her calm face. He heard her confident voice giving him investment advice that actually made perfect sense. He kept seeing that mysterious smile that said she knew secrets he didn't know. He sat in his enormous office on the 45th floor of a skyscraper. The whole city of New York stretched out below him like a toy town made of tiny buildings and little cars. Usually, this view made him feel powerful and important. Today, it just made him feel confused and small. His phone buzzed. It was Thomas Roberts, his private investigator. Thomas was the best in the business. If you needed to find out anything about anyone, Thomas could do it. "I've got the information you wanted about Elena Washington," Thomas said. "But boss, you're not going to believe this." Alexander sat up straight in his leather chair. His heart started beating faster. "Tell me everything." "Elena Washington graduated at the very top of her class from Columbia University," Thomas began. "She has a master's degree in both finance and mathematics. Her professors said she was the smartest student they'd ever taught. And get this, she used to work at Goldman Sachs." Alexander dropped his coffee cup. It fell from his hand and shattered on his expensive wooden desk. Hot coffee spilled everywhere, making a big brown puddle. He didn't even notice. He didn't care about the mess. "Goldman Sachs," he whispered. "That's impossible. Why would someone from Goldman Sachs be serving tables?" Goldman Sachs was one of the most important investment banks in the entire world. Only the smartest, most talented people got jobs there. Getting hired at Goldman Sachs was like winning the lottery and becoming a movie star at the same time. "That's where it gets really interesting," Thomas continued. 5 years ago, She was one of their top analysts. One of the absolute best. She created computer programs that helped the company make over $200 million. Everyone said she was brilliant. Everyone said she was going to be a partner before she turned 30. They said she was going to be rich and famous and powerful. Alexander's hands started shaking. So what happened? Why is she working at a restaurant? What went wrong? Thomas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice sounded angry. She was accused of insider trading. Her supervisor, a man named Richard Hayes, told investigators that she was using illegal information to make trades. He said she was breaking the law to make money. There was a big investigation. The SEC got involved. That's the government agency that watches over financial companies to make sure nobody cheats. It was all over the news for months. Her picture was in every newspaper and on every website. Was she guilty? Alexander demanded. His voice came out louder than he meant it to. No, Thomas said firmly. They investigated for 8 months. They looked at everything. Her computer, her phone, her bank accounts, everything. They never found any evidence because there wasn't any evidence to find. The charges were completely dropped. But by then, her reputation was destroyed. No company on Wall Street would hire her. Nobody would even return her phone calls. Alexander felt something cold settle in his stomach. Why did Richard Hayes accuse her if she didn't do anything wrong? Here's the really interesting part, Thomas said. 6 months after Elena lost her job, Richard Hayes got promoted to her position. He got her office. He got her clients. He got her projects. He got everything that should have been hers. Alexander felt his stomach twist into a knot. He'd been in the finance world long enough to understand exactly what had happened. Richard Hayes had stolen Elena's work. He'd stolen her ideas and her computer programs. Then, when investigators started asking questions about illegal trading, he blamed everything on Elena to save himself. It was the oldest, dirtiest trick in the business. And it worked because Richard was a white man with powerful connections and rich friends to protect him. Elena was a black woman without anyone to defend her. The system believed Richard's lies and destroyed Elena's life. There's more, Thomas said quietly. Elena spent all her savings on lawyers trying to clear her name. Every single penny she'd ever saved. She lost her apartment because she couldn't pay rent. She lost her car. She even lost most of her friends because people were afraid to be associated with someone accused of a crime, even though she was innocent. People she thought cared about her just disappeared. Alexander leaned back in his chair. His mind was racing like a car going 200 miles per hour. The woman who had served him water last night wasn't just smart. She was a genius. A genius who'd been destroyed by the same corrupt, unfair system that had made Alexander rich. Where is she living now? Alexander asked. Besides the restaurant, I mean. She lives in a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn. It's so small you can touch both walls at the same time. She takes the subway to work every day. She's been at the Diamond Palace for 6 months, working double shifts most days just to pay her rent and buy food. But here's what's really strange, boss. My sources tell me she still studies the stock market every single night. She still has contacts at some small investment firms. She still analyzes data and makes predictions, just for herself now. It's like she can't stop, even though the industry destroyed her. It's like investigating stocks and markets is part of who she is, like breathing. After Alexander hung up the phone, he sat in his office for a very long time, just staring at nothing. The coffee was still spilled on his desk, but he didn't clean it up. He didn't call anyone to clean it up. He just sat there, thinking. He thought about how he'd treated Elena yesterday. How he'd laughed at her like she was a joke. How he'd assumed she was nobody important. How he'd been so certain that he was better than her just because he had money and she didn't. How he'd looked right at her and seen nothing but a uniform and a name tag. Shame burned in his chest like a hot coal. It hurt to breathe. But there was something else too. Something besides shame. Curiosity. If Elena was as brilliant as Thomas said, And clearly she was. What else did she know? What had she observed while serving him and Christopher yesterday? What had she seen that he'd missed? Alexander grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. His assistant, Sarah, looked up in surprise. She'd worked for Alexander for 7 years, and she'd never seen him leave in the middle of the day like this. "Cancel my meetings," he said. "But sir, you have a conference call with the Tokyo office in 20 minutes. They've been waiting for this call for 2 weeks. "I said cancel everything," Alexander repeated. His voice was firm. "Tell them something came up. Tell them I'll call them tomorrow." Alexander drove his expensive car to the Diamond Palace. It was early afternoon, before the dinner rush. The restaurant was mostly empty. A few people sat at tables near the windows, eating lunch and talking quietly. He saw Elena immediately. She was setting tables for the evening, folding cloth napkins into perfect triangular shapes. Each napkin was exactly the same. Each one was placed in exactly the right spot. She moved with the kind of precision that came from doing something 1,000 times. When she saw Alexander walk through the door, she didn't look surprised. It was like she'd been expecting him. Like she'd known he would come back. "Mr. Sterling," she said politely, "we don't serve lunch on Tuesdays. Dinner starts at 6 o'clock. "I'm not here to eat," Alexander said. His voice came out rougher and shakier than he wanted. "I'm here to talk to you." Elena set down the napkin she was holding. She looked at him with those same calm, steady eyes. "I'm working." "I know who you are," Alexander said quietly. The words felt heavy in his mouth. "I know about Goldman Sachs. I know about Richard Hayes. I know about the investigation and the accusations. I know everything." For the first time since he'd met her, Elena's calm expression cracked. Her eyes flashed with something that might have been anger or pain or both mixed together. Her jaw tightened. Her hands curled into fists. "So you had me investigated," Elena said. Her voice was quiet but sharp, like a knife cutting through butter. "You couldn't accept that a waitress might actually know something, so you had to dig into my past. You had to find out my secrets." "That's not why I did it," Alexander said quickly. "I mean, yes, I was curious, but—" "Curious?" Elena interrupted. Her calm mask was completely gone now. Her eyes blazed with anger that had been buried for 5 long years. "You were curious? Do you know what it's like to have your entire life investigated? To have people digging through everything you've ever done, looking for proof that you're a criminal? I lived through that nightmare once already. And now you bring it all back because you can't handle being surprised by someone you thought was beneath you." Alexander felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. She was right. She was absolutely right. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. "You're right. I shouldn't have investigated you without asking. But Elena, what happened to you wasn't fair. It wasn't right. Of course it wasn't fair." Elena's voice got louder. A few customers in the restaurant turned to look at them. "Nothing about my life has been fair for 5 years. I worked harder than anyone else at Goldman Sachs. I stayed late every night. I came in early every morning. I created programs that made the company millions of dollars. And what did I get? I got blamed for crimes I didn't commit. I got my name destroyed. I got blacklisted from every company on Wall Street." Tears started forming in Elena's eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't let them fall. She'd cried enough tears over the past 5 years. "Richard Hayes stole everything from me," she continued. Her voice shook with emotion. "He stole my work. He stole my ideas. He stole my future. And when investigators started asking questions, he blamed me to save himself. And you know what the worst part was? Everyone believed him. Everyone. Because he looked the part. Because he had the right connections. Because he knew the right people. And I was just—" "You were just someone they could throw away," Alexander finished quietly. "Someone they didn't think mattered." Elena looked at him with surprise. Maybe he did understand, at least a little bit. "Why are you here, Mr. Sterling?" Elena asked. "What do you want from me?" Alexander took a deep breath. "I want to offer you a job." Elena laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was a bitter, sad laugh. "A job? Let me guess. You want to hire me as your personal waitress? Serve drinks at your fancy parties?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "I want you to be the chief investment officer of Sterling Capital. That's my company. I want you to manage investments worth $3 billion. I want you to have an office on the top floor. I want you to have a team of analysts working under you. I want to give you back the career that was stolen from you." Elena stared at him like he'd just told her the sky was purple. "You're joking." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," Alexander said. "Elena, I've spent 15 years finding talented people. That's what I do. That's how I built my fortune. And you're the most talented person I've ever met. What you said yesterday about emerging markets and clean energy and medical technology. I had my team analyze your advice. It's brilliant. It's exactly what I would have recommended, except you saw things even I missed." "Why would you trust me?" Elena asked. Her voice was suspicious. "Everyone else thinks I'm a criminal. Everyone else thinks I can't be trusted with money." "Because I looked at the evidence," Alexander said. "Or rather, I looked at the lack of evidence. They investigated you for 8 months and found nothing because there was nothing to find. You were innocent. You are innocent. And I think the world needs to know that." Elena shook her head. "It's not that simple. Even if I wanted to work for you, which I'm not saying I do, my reputation is destroyed. The moment your clients find out you hired me, they'll pull their money out. They'll think you've lost your mind." "Let them think what they want," Alexander said. "I didn't build a $4 billion company by caring what other people think. I built it by recognizing talent when I see it. And I see it in you." Elena was quiet for a long moment. She looked down at her hands, at the simple uniform she wore, at the name tag that said her name but told people nothing about who she really was. "What's the catch?" she finally asked. "There's always a catch." "There is one condition," Alexander admitted. "I don't just want to hire you. I want to help you clear your name completely. I want to go after Richard Hayes. I want to prove to the world what he did to you. But I can't do that without your permission. I need you to trust me." Elena's eyes filled with tears again, and this time she let them fall. They rolled down her cheeks like tiny rivers. "Do you know how long it's been since someone believed in me? Do you know how long it's been since someone saw me as more than just a cautionary tale? More than just someone who failed?" "You didn't fail," Alexander said gently. "You were sabotaged. There's a difference." Elena wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "If I say yes, if I agree to this, I have a condition too." "Name it," Alexander said. "I want to create a program at Sterling Capital," Elena said. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "A program that finds talented people who've been overlooked. People from poor neighborhoods. People who didn't go to fancy schools. People who got knocked down by life and need someone to give them a second chance. If you're serious about recognizing talent in unexpected places, then prove it. Don't just hire me. Help me find others like me." A smile spread across Alexander's face. It was a real smile, not the fake smile he wore at business meetings. "That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect." "I'm serious about this," Elena warned. "This isn't just about me getting my career back. This is about changing the system that destroyed me in the first place." "I know," Alexander said. "And I want to help you do it. Yesterday, you taught me something important. You taught me that I've been blind. I've been walking through the world thinking I see everything, but I've been missing the most important things right in front of my face. I've been judging people by their clothes and their titles instead of by their minds and their hearts." Elena studied his face carefully, looking for any sign that he was lying or manipulating her. But all she saw was honesty. All she saw was someone who genuinely wanted to make things right. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll accept your offer. But I'm keeping this waitress job for 1 more month." Alexander looked confused. "Why?" "Because I need to remember," Elena said simply. "I need to remember what it feels like to be invisible, to be overlooked, to be judged unfairly. If I'm going to help other people who've been treated that way, I can't forget what it feels like. And I don't want to forget that the most important lessons sometimes come from the most unexpected places." Alexander nodded slowly. "You're right. And maybe I should spend a day working here too. Maybe I need to see the world from a different perspective." Elena smiled, and this time it was a real smile. A warm smile. A smile full of hope. "Maybe you should." 3 months later, Elena Washington stood in a beautiful office on the top floor of Sterling Capital. Through the huge windows, she could see the entire city of New York spread out below her. On her desk was a nameplate that said, "Chief Investment Officer." On her wall was a photo of her first team meeting, where she presented her ideas to a room full of people who actually listened. And next to that photo was a picture of her wearing her waitress uniform at the Diamond Palace. She kept it there to remind herself of where she'd been. To remind herself that dignity doesn't come from a job title. That worth doesn't come from money. That intelligence doesn't come from fancy schools or expensive suits. Alexander had kept his promise. He'd helped her expose Richard Hayes. The investigation revealed that Richard had been stealing credit for other people's work for years. He was fired from Goldman Sachs and banned from working in finance ever again. Elena's name was cleared completely. But more importantly, Elena had started her program. The Sterling Opportunity Initiative found talented people from unexpected places and gave them chances they'd never had before. Former waiters became analysts. Taxi drivers became investment strategists. Single mothers became financial advisors. People who'd been invisible became visible. People who'd been overlooked became essential. Alexander learned something too. He learned that real intelligence means admitting when you're wrong. Real power means lifting other people up. And real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you change and the justice you create. Sometimes the most important person in the room is the one you almost didn't see. Sometimes the wisest voice is the one you almost didn't hear. Sometimes the biggest lesson comes from the smallest moment. And sometimes, just sometimes, a joke can change everything.